All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is Tariq Masood. I'm the faculty director of the Kennedy School's Middle East Initiative and a professor here of international relations. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon's event entitled Lebanon on the Brink. Now, if you're a relative novice on Middle Eastern affairs and you look at the country of Lebanon on a map, you could be forgiven for wondering whether such a seemingly tiny country could be all that important. It's pretty small, has only about 7 million people. But as, of course, as anyone familiar with the region will gladly tell you, Lebanon's importance politically, culturally, and intellectually is almost perfectly inversely proportional to its size. I'm an Egyptian, and I always like to say that Egypt produces most of the Arab world's ideas and culture. But frankly, Lebanon, which is 1/15 of Egypt's population, gives Egypt a run for its money. And in recent years, it probably edges it out, probably decisively. Lebanon's influence is made all the more remarkable by the fact that internally the country is deeply troubled. Though it enjoys more pluralistic politics than any other Arab country aside from Tunisia, it's also a place that is fractured by deep communal differences in which political leadership is exercised by a cartel of ossified sectarian elites who hang on to power by emphasizing and exploiting the things that divide the Lebanese people over what unites them. And I think these sectarian differences render the country easily penetrated and manipulated by foreign meddlers. And it results also in a government that is so gridlocked that the state really does fail to provide many basic services. In August of last year, the scope of the government's failure was tragically laid bare for all the world to see when a warehouse on the Beirut seaside, which was full of improperly stored fertilizer, spontaneously combusted, laying waste to a large swath of the capital and costing hundreds of lives. Now, in the face of the government's abject failure, the Lebanese people have not been silent. Since even before the explosion, the Lebanese have been protesting against their government for much of the past 18 months and they've compelled at least one change of cabinet. Now, it remains to be seen whether this popular movement can produce the more fundamental change that millions of Lebanese people seem to be seeking, but it is definitely true to say that the Lebanese people are not quiescent. Now, to help us understand Lebanon's travails and its prospects of achieving something better, we have with us today one of the world's most gifted and sensitive scholars of that country and of the Arabic speaking world more broadly. Nadim Shehadi is the executive director of the Lebanese American University's academic center, which is based in New York City. And he's also a fellow of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, whose Middle East program he headed for a number of years. Now, before taking up his role at the Lebanese American University, Nadim had a number of very important roles in the field of Middle Eastern studies, most recently as the director of the Faris Center for Eastern Mediterranean Studies at Tufts University's Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. And before that, he was for many years the director of Lebanese studies at St. Anthony's College, Oxford. You will get to see his rare intellectual quality for yourself in just a moment, but you can find evidence of it in the fact that he was, when he was very young, the co-editor of a book with one of the giants of Middle Eastern studies, Albert Hourani, with whom he worked on a book on the Lebanese diaspora. And it's clear to me that that mighty scholar saw in today's speaker what I've had the pleasure of seeing for a number of years and what I think you will all see today, that he is a scholar who is equal parts learned, thoughtful, insightful, and modest. Nadim will speak for about 30 to 40 minutes about the situation in Lebanon as he sees it, and then we will have some time for questions. We will try to end at around 2:45. I will note that when time does come for questions, if you object to having your face and voice recorded, then you can convey your question to me using Zoom's chat function, and I will ask the question on your behalf if we have the time to get to it. And with that, let me welcome our speaker, Nadim Shehadi.
Okay. Hi. Thank you, Tarek. Thank you for the introduction. I only wish my daughter was listening. Um, it's a real pleasure seeing you again and seeing your students. And I have very fond memories of our interactions in Cambridge, and hope to see you very soon again. Now, I'm going to do exactly what you asked me, which is just to give a few concepts rather than a formal presentation with PowerPoint slides and all that, and then we'll open it for discussion, because it is very much I'm throwing ideas rather than giving you the solution, if you like. Now, I've just come back from Lebanon. I was there. I came back last Saturday, and I will leave the actual current situation to the question time. I'm just going to give you some background. In a nutshell, the country is in deep crisis. It's deep existential crisis. It's something that happens that makes you, in a way, reevaluate everything. So the people you alluded to in the streets, the slogans you hear, the discussions on Facebook, on Twitter, on social media, are basically reevaluating the whole country. There are several narratives competing. They're discussing the system, the values, the institutions, the history, everything. Everything is up in the air. And this happens in times of deep change. I mean, for me, the world moves in shocks and failures. Rather, it's defeats that are the driver, rather than there's a very interesting book called The Culture of Defeat, and Ibn Khaldun has 2 chapters on how defeat affects societies, and I think defeats affect people more than victories. Reaching rock bottom sometimes gives you creativity if you rise again. That is, but. So we are in such. I mean, the best way I can present it is that if you imagine the atmosphere in the region after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, the rise of the states, the newly independent states, with what you call post-colonial liberal order. You will see images in black and white of people having parties, going to the opera, wearing fedoras, and it's a very different atmosphere from the images you see after the shock of 1948, which was a huge defeat. So if you look at the region 10 years later, everybody's military uniform, mobilized, all the way to Pakistan. Even there's an atmospheric change which you see, and after the defeat of 67, 12 years later, you will see people with, the pictures from the region shows you people with beards and with the Iranian Revolution, the Ikhwan, the Hezbollah. So you can tell that there's a switch that makes. So we are at such a time. It's impossible to tell where we're going, whether we're going to a better place or a worse place. It's not always a progression, if you like. So I'm going to give you a flavor of the debate in Lebanon by comparing 3 narratives that are dominant and that are being discussed, and I'll tell you. I'll try and explain the context and counter them a bit. So one of them is about the creation of Lebanon. Lebanon is 100 years old. in September, what turned 100 years old. So this post-colonial structure is reevaluated. Has it been a success? Has it been a failure, etc.? The second is the history of Lebanon since then. Has it been a history of complete conflict all the time? I mean, there's a narrative that says that. And the third is the narrative of the revolution now. What are they asking for? And I'll put this in a bit of a regional context. So the post-colonial creation of Lebanon, I think, I mean, you presented it very well in your introduction, and it is the dominant view that the so-called sectarian system has failed. It's been and it's the cause of everything. And now, I think if we put this in a context to understand the local dimension, I think a lot of historians in the West ignore local agency in the creation of the states in the region, in Lebanon specifically, there was a lot of local agency. In other countries, there was local agency, but it was disappointed, and it was also ignored by many historians. Now, Lebanon, if you like, is the butt end of empire. That's one way of describing it. Before World War I, you had three empires that dominated half the world that we know. This is the Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Russian Empire. And children of empire have a different culture than children of Westphalian homogeneous states. If you are a child of empire, an empire rules over many nations. And if you walk in Istanbul, Izmir, Alexandria, or Beirut, or any of, you will see different languages, different clothes, different turbans, different food, different religions, different ethnic groups. It's a cosmopolitan sort of mixture, and it's a coexistence of different contradictory identities under that umbrella of an empire in the cities. The 20th century created or aimed at creating the extreme version of the opposite of that. You know, Ataturk wanted to create a sort of a Jacobin secular state where everybody was equal, where no identities mattered, and where the society was homogeneous. Now, this model, these two contrasting models have been colliding in the region for over a century and a half, even, because the collision started in the Ottoman reforms and the Tanzimat, when the Ottomans themselves started aiming towards that. So Ataturk is the culmination of the Tanzimat, if you like, fast tracking of that. So the region basically moved in that direction, in the direction of homogeneous national sovereign nation states with uniform identities, with equal citizenship and all that. Lebanon didn't. So Lebanon, in a way, skipped the 20th century. We just skipped it. We didn't like it. The French tried to impose on us a Third Republic constitution, and we we didn't buy it, of course, but we were not going to disappoint them, guests coming from. So we lied to them. We said, yes, of course, we want to be secular, we want to be homogeneous, and religion sucks and all that. But, temporarily for now, let's introduce Articles 95 and Article 9 and Article I don't know what in the Constitution. And we're still in that temporary period because I don't think the Lebanese ever meant it, because this fits more our culture. We live in a multicultural, multi-religious, love-hate relationship with each other, and this is how we've been for hundreds of years. They imposed. So if that model failed, the imposed homogenization model also failed in the region. It produced dictatorships who tried to forcibly homogenize the population, and so the debate is between these two models, if you like. This is part of the post-colonial narrative discussion in Lebanon, and the dominant view is the one which wants to abolish the system and join the 20th century after people are leaving it. So it's a bit like that. Now, the other narrative is the failure of the model, the failure that Lebanon, since its creation, even since the 1860s, has been in constant crisis. You had this 1860, so you had short periods of peace in between, but it's a history of constant crisis. You had 1860, you had 1958, so barely after the creation of the state, you had 1958, and then you had 1967 and 75, and why should we? And they blame the system for it. I'd like to offer an alternative view. Look at it, upside down, if you like. Lebanon had periods of success, extreme success, where it benefited from the crisis of the region, and there were times when the system clashed with the 20th century, and there were attempts to apply it in the country, and it failed. So in the 1950s, the whole region was in turmoil. Lebanon had two crises, of course, Syria, Egypt, Iraq, then later Sudan and Libya, and so it was all the same kind of wave. Jordan survived, but these countries, the system completely collapsed and were replaced by military dictatorships. In Lebanon, we had our arguments. We had there was violence involved. There was debate, but we went back to the system survived. So in a way, it's part of its the system was much more resilient than in the region, and in the region the system became more and more oppressive as this homogeneity and nationalism and all that was being imposed on the population, and the result was that Lebanon, that was the only open society in the region, received everybody from. I don't think the Lebanese take all the credit for the success that you mentioned in terms of publication and culture and all that. We absorbed all the elite of the region, the writers, the artists, the musicians, the bankers, the gangsters, and the corrupt crooks, and everyone. Beirut became, Beirut brought, from Egypt, we had we had a banking elite from Egypt that had over 100 years of financial expertise on the scale of the Suez Canal, that's what created the expertise in Lebanon. And from Palestine, we had, from Haifa. Haifa was transposed to Ras Beirut, if you like, and Damascus and Aleppo were transposed to Ashrafiyya, another suburb of, and Mosul. We had basically we had all the migrants from the region. We attracted all the Levantine types, if you like, from the region that are more comfortable in a culture of in a mixed cosmopolitan culture than they are in a sort of heavy nationalist sovereign state with an army and and with it, of course, I'm not painting a totally rosy picture. With it came corruption, and with it came a lot of. That's the second narrative, re-examining the model. So the model started in 1921. Lebanon was created in 1921. The constitution was in 1926. The reason why I counter it as being success is because, 100 years later, things have changed. When Lebanon was created in 1921, it was opposed by the people of Tripoli, by the Sunnis, the Shias, the Greek Orthodox, by half the Maronites. Nobody wanted it. 100 years later, if you look at the demonstrations in the street, at civil society, at the youth, the identity of the country is no longer in dispute. So it's a success in that sense. It's a failure in the sense that it can never cope with security threats. If you don't have a strong state, you have to compromise with whatever. So we compromised with Abdel Nasser, we compromised with Yasser Arafat, we compromised with Assad, we're compromising with Hezbollah now, and doesn't create an ideal situation. But to prevent that, you needed a dictatorship. Yasser Arafat wanted to set up a state within a state to launch the liberation of Palestine from Egypt. He didn't succeed. From Jordan, he didn't succeed. From Syria, he didn't succeed. He succeeded in Lebanon because it's a weak state, and we compromise with it. So that's the danger. We cannot deal with actors that don't play the game. It's like playing football with a team that has a sniper on the roof on the second. So the question is it the game that's wrong, or is it that you have problematic actors in that game? So the third narrative, which is the revolution. So the revolution is in a way going against the whole system. They're saying all means all. The whole system is corrupt. The whole political class. They want the parliament to resign, governments to resign. I think this is a very dangerous game myself. It's similar to a global populist revolt against systems, which have produced the worst type of rulers. It's drained the swamp, basically. And we've seen what's happened when you get you disable the political process and the democratic process, and you get populist leaders who are, like in India, in Hungary, in Brazil, Mexico, everywhere. So that's one direction people are going, one direction that the world is going and that the region is going. The other direction is revolts like Sudan, which have produced a very different result. And Iraq was not the result of a revolt, but Iraq is, I think, going in the right direction in terms of its revolt. And so that's the if you like, that's the third narrative, which I would like to question. I have 5 more minutes. How long?
Perfect. That's perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, 3. I can summarize the last 2.
Take your time, but we're totally on time. So 5 minutes, whatever you want to do.
Now I want to refer to. So I'm going to explain the regional dimension now, how this links to, how the crisis in Lebanon links to the region. And so the historian Kamal Salibi wrote a paper in the 1980s, in the sort of mid-80s, late 80s, on Lebanon and the Middle Eastern question. And he basically said that because Lebanon attracts all the thinkers of the region, from Egypt, from Iraq, from Syria, from the Gulf, from North Africa, the intellectual debates of the region are conducted in the cafes of Hamra and in the salons of Beirut. So that's and so he says that the crisis that Lebanon of the region erupt in Lebanon first. So if there is a clash between nationalism and Islam, it erupts in Beirut first, then it develops in then it spreads to the region, because it's a clash of ideas to start with. If there is a clash between the East and West, Shia, Sunni, secularism and religion, all these ideas were being tested in the Lebanese civil war. Peace or war with Israel. That's was tested in the Lebanese civil war. And he said that what happens in Lebanon is a reflection of deeper crises that can spread in the whole region, but that don't go to the surface in the region. They go to the surface in Lebanon first. Now, I think it's a good framework to examine things in, because this is in fact what happened. I mean, we had the first Shia-Sunni clash in Lebanon, and then it became regional. We had the first, all these ideas that were tested became part of the global crisis of the whole region, which we see now. And the region is also going in 2 different directions. The region can go Iraq, Sudan, Lebanon way, or it can go Gaza, Syria, Yemen way. So there are 2 agendas fighting in the region. One of them is led by Iran, by the Revolutionary Guards, perpetual war, resistance, anti-imperialism, anti-whatever, and the other is more. The other agenda is still unclear, but it's more towards peace with Israel. In Dubai, they're more interested in having the Grand Prix and tennis matches than they are in liberating Palestine. And at the center of all this is the question of Palestine. And I think that the question of Palestine has been hijacked by the wrong people in the region. It shouldn't be. Good causes attract the worst type of supporters. If you're a megalomaniac type person, choose a good cause to ride over. It's a good it's a good vehicle. And I think the question of Palestine has been hijacked by Hamas, Hezbollah, the Syrian regime, and the Iranian Revolutionary Guards and the Houthis and all that. And there is no real peace camp in the region. There's a war camp led by the resistance axis, and there's an apathy camp. People that don't care about it anymore. Largely, maybe the fault of the Palestinian leadership. I mean, they've. I think that there is a chance now. We could go either way. The whole region could become a version of Gaza, hostages to militias that want to fight the United States and everybody, and Israel and all that, and it could go towards peace. It's the Sergio Leone theory of international relations. Sergio Leone used to do what was called spaghetti westerns. The good guys had black hats and had white hats, and the bad guys had black hats. So it's the thobe. You have black thobes and white thobes in the clashing in the region. So this is what I wanted to put in context and part of the debate.
Great. So thank you so much, Nadeem. So you put there are a lot of threads that we could pull on, and so we've got about 45 minutes. And so let me start by pulling on a few of these threads, and then we'll open it up for questions. So, one narrative of Lebanon, if one were to look at Lebanon today and take stock of many of the issues that you've discussed, the problems of governance, the sectarian conflict that simmers beneath the surface, at least in some quarters, they would say, well, Lebanon is actually exhibit A in this argument that, the colonial powers, when they left the Middle East or left sub-Saharan Africa, they really bequeathed to the people of the region these quote unquote artificial, fictitious states, to use Bob Bates's term. The scholar Halim Barakat, Lebanese scholar, said that, these states were incoherent because they were so ethnically fragmented, etc. So as part of Lebanon's current governance problem, attributable to colonialism? And if not, then what is the source of the problem?
Yes. Now, I mean, this is a very powerful narrative and very dominant. It's not an easy one to counter. But I think if one picks up the book of Margaret Macmillan, former warden of my college in Oxford, Margaret Macmillan's book on the Versailles Treaty, yes, on the 6 months
that changed the world. Yeah,
that changed the world on Versailles.
Yeah, it's an amazing.
First, it's a great read because she writes it like a novel. She develops the personalities in a way, in an amazing way. All the players, and you will see what a mess they had on their hands. I mean, they were meeting in Paris with 3 empires having collapsed and Europe in rubble. Yeah. And they had to fix the whole world. They did not have PhDs from Harvard or from Princeton or from Fletcher School or Yale or Georgetown or anywhere like that to help them. There was hardly any knowledge of the region other than biblical archaeology and travelers. It was there was very, very little knowledge, and they did it probably correct. The description of lines in the sand is correct. They did it in an amateur way. In fact, it was not lines in the sand. There was a school book, George Adam Smith's Historical Geography of the Holy Land. They tore the pages from that and drew maps, drew on it. and they did a bad job. Yeah. Now they did a bad job in Europe too. They did a much worse job in Europe. If you think that the Versailles order, the post-World War I order, created fascism in Europe, created World War II, created ethnic cleansing, the Balkans. They, you know, in our region, it was fairly stable until the 50s, and it wasn't so bad afterwards. I think the real cataclysms that we had in the region, the the serious wars, I mean, were the Iran-Iraq war, rather. That was we are now living the aftermath of the Iran-Iraq war. Iran is suffering from it because it established the Revolutionary Guards as the dominant force there. We are suffering from the aftermath of that in the region, rather than from the colonial. Now, of course, people, theorists who will always link the Iran-Iraq war to colonialism as well, but I think it's a bit too far. We had the British mandate and the French mandate were about 20 years. Yeah, the French mandate in Lebanon was about 20 years. Our elite looked down on French fonctionnaires that came. The elite in Lebanon, the politicians who were regional, who had, they were families who came from Aleppo, from Mosul, from Alexandria, from all these places. And they had connections with trading connections with Lyon, with Paris. They studied abroad. They had connections at a very high level in the bureaucracy in France. They looked down on the little functionaries that came to give them orders and didn't listen to them. So I don't think we were affected that much in Lebanon on the contrary, we imposed our own system on them.
It's interesting. I mean, I'm sure you saw, and many people saw the widely circulated story that after the explosion in August, there was a fairly popular petition that was making the rounds in Lebanon calling for a reimposition of the French mandate, which spoke, I mean, maybe it was a joke probably, but to me it spoke to this idea that for at least some proportion of the Lebanese people, that period was not seen as such a bad period. I do want to open this up for questions, but I will just ask you to react to one more provocation before I do that. I look at Lebanon and I see that it, through its recent history, has oscillated between one of two states. One state, which is the state that it exists in now, is what we might call, to use Thomas Carruthers' term, kind of feckless democracy, feckless pluralism, in which, you actually do have elections that are more or less free. You have a political environment that's much more open than exists in any other part of the Arab world. You have a kind of pluralism of political parties and actors in Lebanon that you really don't have except in Tunisia and Iraq in the same way. And so that's one state that Lebanon exists in. And then it oscillates between that and this state of civil war, in which instead of being in this kind of cartelized, sectarian, feckless system, but democratic in its broad contours, they instead fall upon each other in bloodshed. But what you don't get is, as you pointed out, the kind of one-man personalized rule that you see as the modal form of rule in much of the Middle East. Now, if I were to be asked to choose, right, between the kind of certainly I wouldn't choose the Civil War. I'd take the strong man over the Civil War. But if you were to ask me to choose between what Lebanon has in terms of its level of political freedom and pluralism and what, say, Egypt has, I would pick Lebanon every day of the week. And in that telling, then one might ask whether the odd way in which Lebanon came into being And the fact that it is deeply divided ethnically, it is not homogenous, has no hope of being homogenous, if that actually is a source of the country's relative strength, precisely because strongman rule was not on the table there, you have at least this measure of democracy.
Yes. Okay, now, I mean, you've answered your own question in a way. The Lebanese ask themselves this question every day. There's like a pendulum that swings, from one extreme and then gets there and then goes back. We started off with freedom, open society, weak state, enjoyed the prosperity it brought. Then we had the threat of nationalism and Nasserism and the revolt of 1958, after which we tolerated the Shehadist rule, which was very stronger army. The Deuxième Bureau and the Mukhabarat of the army were controlling elections, were controlling freedom was limited, and the state was modernizing and becoming stronger. And then by 1970, we were fed up with that. We couldn't tolerate it anymore, and we elected the French by one vote, and we went back to prosperity and chaos. But we had the Civil War, and we had. As a result of that, after the Civil War, we did tolerate the Syrian limiting our freedom, because we thought we are not fit for that, and then we revolted against them. And so there is this question, this pendulum that goes from wanting freedom to seeing the consequence and chaos that it brings, to tolerating suppression and the strong state, kept becoming claustrophobic from it, going back to chaos and freedom. It is. You've described the history on that. But what I want to dispute is this notion of deeply divided state. This is the product of a homogenizing mind rather than a homogenized, it's if you like, sectarianism is mostly in the eye of the beholder. You can take any situation and make it sectarian if you look at it in a sectarian way. The Civil War in Lebanon was not sectarian. It was not all the time a civil war. You need to revise all these notions to come back to a consensus of where to go from here. The left wing who sided with the Palestinians, and a lot of them were Christians. They were communists. They were. It's not this sort of caricature that you get from Robert Fisk and others, that it's a deeply divided society, the Muslims against the Christians, this is not reality. The cards were completely reshuffled in 2005. So after the assassination of Hariri, basically the problem shifted. It became the country was divided between pro-Syrian and anti-Syrian, pro-Hezbollah and anti-Hezbollah. It was two clear political agendas with people from every color that you can think of on both sides, except amongst the Shia, where it appears it is sort of appearing to be a consensus again, but it's not. It's Hezbollah lists gets 90 to 95% of the votes in South Lebanon, in the same way as Bashar al-Assad used to get 97.6% of the vote in Syria.
Oh, i.e., it's a fiction.
It's not a fiction. It's real votes. But what they've done, I mean, Hezbollah has killed more Shia than Israel has, and it started with assassinating all the muqawami that were not of, a bit like what happened in Iran. In Iran, the revolution was very varied with, politically, and the revolutionary guards basically assassinated everybody else and monopolized the revolution. In Lebanon, I mean, Amal and Hezbollah fought 3 years, a very brutal war between 1988 and 1990, and then they signed a pact where they would not go against each other in the elections, and where they divided the cake, and that's how they get 95% of the votes. Where they do a common list in the south and in the Bekaa. If you put a donkey on it, it will win the election, because there's no opposition in it on that.
But just to make sure that I understand and everybody understands your point there, you're saying that though the Hezbollah has a monopoly on the Shia vote, particularly in the south of the country, that's not because Shias or are acting or are inherently sectarian. It's just because through kind of mafia-like tactics, Hezbollah has ensured that there's nobody else to vote for.
Yes. And also disputing the idea of sectarianism, that it needs to be suppressed. I mean, sectarianism is like, identities are a bit like, when you talk about the Arab Spring,
yeah,
it's not the Arab Spring as in the spring of, like spring and winter and like a season. It's the Arab Spring.
Yeah.
The more you press on it, the higher it will jump.
Yeah.
So anyone is sectarian if you suppress them.
Yeah.
And the most extreme Islamist phenomenon come in secular societies, because you suppress religion, you get extremism. It's a very simple formula. We don't have extremists in Lebanon as much as there is in Tunis or even in France.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Oh, so I want to invite everybody to raise your hand if you have a question. I'm going to look for that. While I'm waiting for those people to do that, I'll just ask one last question, which comes to something that you said about the current revolutionary moment.
Yes.
And, it sounded like you were saying this current moment in which Lebanese people are protesting this ossified system that I described in quite pejorative terms. You are making a very unique point and counterintuitive point where you're saying, actually, this protest movement shares a lot with populist, anti-institutional movements that we're seeing all around the world. It's a kind of throw the bums out, drain the swamp kind of movement, and consequently is less productive and less worthy of being valorized than certainly my comments implied. A, I want to ask you if I understood you correctly, and B, I want to ask you if this revolutionary moment or movement is actually not the way forward. What is the way forward? Are we to leave this talk saying that Nadim Shehadi said that actually the current system's pretty okay, it's not sectarian as people are saying, and the movement to bring it down has much more to do with Donald Trump than it has to do with anything we would find admirable?
Yes. No, I'm saying that maybe you need to do the same re-examination of American history that I'm suggesting for Lebanon to resolve the Trump phenomenon, because it's not going to go away. But I'll tell you what it is. I mean, sometimes you have to look at the subtitle when people are talking. When the Lebanese go flag waving, when you describe it as a deeply divided society, which is not nationalist and all that, but we're the most flag wavers in the region. We go down flag waving in 2005 and now and all that. There's a subtext to it, because we are accused of being deeply divided. The Syrians controlled the country for 15 years in a very brutal way, saying that we have no choice. These Lebanese, they're sectarian, they're crazy. If we leave tomorrow, they will kill each other. So the Lebanese, when they go down and say we are not sectarian, we are united, it's part of the dilemma that they have, that if they want to be themselves, then the world will bring Bashar al-Assad or Hafez al-Assad and say, control these people who don't think like the 20th century, and they think they're unique or whatever. And we would, if they had fought, if they had, everybody knew that Hezbollah had killed and the Syrians had killed Hariri, but we didn't want to fight a civil war again. So we asked for an international tribunal as an alternative to. So asking for an international tribunal was the alternative to civil war in a sense. You wanted a international protection, which comes as part of the Levantine package. In Levantine days, Levantine traders had protection. If you went to see Jazar Pasha in Akka in the late 18th century, you don't go wearing a musket and a sword to protect you. You go wearing lots of medals, Saint Ignatius and Saint Dimitri and Mawarif Shu, to tell him that, the Russians, the British, the Italians, the Austrians protect me. You can't mess with me. So the system has built in its mechanism that it needs international protection, because what we did was we abolished the Sultan, but we kept the millet system in place. So there's no overall power. There's the underlying idea that there's a international protection needed. And another part of the subtext, for example, when we say kullun yani kullun, which means all.
Yeah, this is the slogan of the protesters. Like, say,
yes.
when we say all of them out, we mean all of them.
We mean all of them.
Yeah.
Now you have to look at the history of that. In 2015-16, there were protests which were called the You Stink protests.
Because of the garbage.
Because of the garbage.
Yeah.
Now, in the You Stink protests, they had a poster with all the leaders and they were protesting against the whole system. That poster included Hassan Nasrallah,
the leader of Hezbollah.
The leader of Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah sent its black shirted thugs downtown, beat up some of the protesters and threatened them and all that. And they put another poster without Hassan Nasrallah in it. So when they say now kullun yani kullun, it specifically means Hassan Nasrallah, almost.
Interesting.
It means we're not excluding anyone.
Interesting.
Every politician in Lebanon can be criticized except Hassan Nasrallah before.
Yeah.
When you say kullun yani kullun, it means people are afraid of Hezbollah because of the assassinations, because of the black shirts, because it's the only one, and because we don't want a civil war, and because we have no protection.
Yeah.
International protection.
Yeah.
So especially during certain periods.
but Nadeem, what I'm having a little bit of trouble, figuring out is whether you're telling me that the current protests are a sign of the country's health, or actually are threatening to a political order that doesn't need to be swept away. Maybe it needs some reform, but it's actually a pretty decent political order all in all. If after all they were able to avoid a civil war in 2005, as you pointed out. So which of these is it exactly?
It's saying that that's not the problem. You see, you have to distinguish between the game and the players.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. If you're playing football with players that play by the rules, then football is a good game. If you're playing football with one team having snipers shooting at you, you have to change the game.
Right.
Or you can't play that game with these players, basically. On that, the same players are active in Palestine, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Yemen, and in other places. It's the different branches of the axis of resistance of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, if you like, wherever they go, the state collapses, the system collapses, and it's replaced by militias that are trained and funded and organized and follow instructions. Are part of that axis. So we are either moving towards the whole region becoming, a revival of the Sassanid Empire or whatever, with the whole region, all the states in the region failing and ruled by militias that work with Tehran, or the revolts that we're seeing in the region, the revolts that you're seeing in Lebanon, the revolts that you're seeing in Iraq itself against the Iranian militias, the revolts that you're seeing in Iran itself against the IRGC, and the Yemen, and in Yemen, the war in Yemen, is you have two orders fighting each other.
Yeah, yeah. So Nadeem, let me
Lebanon is far healthier as a society because of the freedom it has. But it's the freedom is not. Luqman Slim was assassinated 2 weeks ago because of his opposition to Hezbollah, and they're becoming they're in a kind of a panic because the protest is identifying them more and more as the problem.
Yeah,
it started with Killon Yani Killon.
Yeah,
and the protest, if you look at for example, the social media platforms like Megaphone and at all these blogs and podcasts and discussion groups on social media, they're moving more towards openly talking about Hezbollah with a lot of reservations because they don't want to create a sectarian issue.
Yeah, yeah. So Nadeem, this is great, but let me open it up now to our audience, and I'm going to call on people who have their hands up. So I'm going to start with Randy Cotty.
Hi, Professor. Thank you very much for your intervention. I just wanted to bring the conversation a bit back to the current situation, and I wanted to ask you basically what is the likelihood of having an election in due time in Lebanon, and if not, how the elite is going to basically still keep its legitimacy towards the international organization and international community, broadly speaking.
Yeah, it's, President Macron came and suggested that we form a government and we hold elections. Last time we had that, we were paralyzed for 29 months and we couldn't do it. So the reason we have a crisis now in Lebanon, an economic crisis and a political crisis, is because we could not form a government unless we bow to what the dictates of the militia, if you like. So the last crisis, which lasted almost 3 years, was resolved when we accepted to hand over the parliament, the presidency, and the whole country to them in a way. We can't do it. There's nothing more to hand over, and we haven't been able to form a government for 2 years almost. So this is the problem. The problem is paralysis, because one of the players, which is part of the fabric of Lebanese society, which we cannot deny, it's not like a totally foreign player, does not play by the rules. It plays by assassination, by paralysis, by declaring wars, maintaining constant state of war. You know, Hassan Nasrallah declares war on Israel every single summer. And every single summer, it ruins the tourist season, the investment season. It has a huge cost. I mean, one of the reasons why we are, I mean, the economic crisis, if you want to compartmentalize what we're going through, there's an economic crisis, there's a financial crisis, there's a political one, there is COVID. There, you know, if you want to take the economic crisis is basically because we've been cut off completely politically with our main economic partners, which are the Gulf countries, after we've been taken over by the axis of resistance, like on that. So we're like a hostage to that axis. So we won't be able to form a government. We won't be able to form to have elections until they allow us to, you know, in a sense. And Macron made it worse, because Macron contacted Rouhani and asked him for help, and Rouhani took it as an opportunity to make it worse, because if he's been asked for help, he can extract a higher price if he makes it worse.
All right, Nadim, the next question that I have is from Michael McGettrick.
Yes.
Hey, thank you for speaking with us today. So along similar lines, you just spoke about the Gulf relations with Lebanon and how that's become somewhat frayed because of the somewhat of a takeover by Hezbollah. How do you see the rivalry between Saudi Arabia and the Gulf versus Iran playing out in the near future of Lebanon?
Yeah, I don't see it as a rivalry between Iran and the Gulf states. I don't think the Iranians see it that way either. I think they see it more as a fight against the United States and its assets in the region, which are its allies, which are and the Gulf states and Israel and all that. So it's not. I don't see it as an Iranian Saudi rivalry or GCC Saudi rivalry. In Washington, it's like that because it's become polarized. You know, the real Sunni Shia divide is in Washington D.C., not in the region, and the real Iranian Arab divide is in Washington D.C. because, you know, if you're a Democrat, you're with the Shia and with the Iranians. If you're a Republican, you're with the Saudis and the Sunnis. With every change of government, you have a flip-flop of the policy. It's becoming ridiculous, and it's a big threat to the security of the region. So I don't see it at all as that. I see it that there is a threat to the whole region. By the Revolutionary Guards, by Iran, And they use the same methods: assassinations, paralysis, takeover by militias, collapse of the state. Gaza is an example. They maintain the state of war. You know, every time things calm down, they send a few rockets to maintain the state of war. When the people are about to starve, they negotiate with Israel to get in some, let them breathe a bit. But it's very clear that they can only breathe if Hamas allows them to do so. And it's the same in Lebanon now. We are waiting for the grace and favor of Hezbollah to form a government and to breathe and to be able to discuss with the IMF and to be able to trade again and continue. We have very historic relations between the Levant. I mean, the relations between the Levant and the GCC countries are very deep relations. They're not just those of migrant workers going back and remittances and all that, and we're cut off from that.
Okay, my next question that I have is from Isabel Kleitsch.
Thank you, Professor Nadim, for your insights. And I wanted to come back to a different set of institutions. You've talked a lot about political institutions, but as far as I understood the protests also and the popular demands, they were very much focused on public service delivery and resources that are not properly managed in Lebanon. So could you maybe share a bit of your thoughts on how improvements in this direction could look like in Lebanon, and how the popular demands could be met in the current system? Thank you.
Yes, I mean, if you're asking my opinion, I favor local government to solve the problems. What you see in the protests is mainly Beirut focused, but if you look in the regions, like in the town of Zahle has 24-hour electricity and has all the services because everything's managed by the town council, by the city council. In where I live in Beit Miri, 100% of the garbage is recycled, and we have services by the municipality. And I think what the protest achieved in 2015-16 was to highlight that central government is not the answer to resolve regional services, that decentralized services are. We've inherited some monopolies from the Ottoman period and from the Mandate period, which were maintained, like electricity provision was national by with franchises. So the electricity is distributed through local franchises, but the production is centralized. And where the electricity production became was decentralized, there's less of a problem. So these are technical issues that can be resolved if we have a functioning government. The reason why we don't have a functioning government in Lebanon is because we have been under attack for the last 15, 16 years. I mean, we've had since 2004 about 10 years of continuous assassinations with 2 wars with Israel. We've had 2 periods of complete paralysis with no government, no parliament, no elections, no president. I mean, sometimes we survive better without a government, but it does affect and a continuous state of war. And don't forget the big explosion in the port. The big explosion in the port is basically because the Lebanese state doesn't have authority over the port on that. So so I think that all these issues can be resolved through a normal process, through parliament, through discussions, through. But they're not the problem. They're not what made us. Let me give you an example. There is a city in Jordan, in southeast Jordan, called Ma'an. I don't know if anyone has heard about it. Ma'an used to be. Ma'an is the. I can see Sultan shaking his head. Kifak. So Ma'an was the last outpost before you enter the desert from Bilad Sham. Yeah. And Ma'an was the intersection of all the caravan routes since Nabatean days, since the days of Petra and Palmyra and Balbak and Madain Saleh and Hijaz. So Ma'an was a flourishing city because of that. Then Ma'an became the intersection of all the caravans that went to Mecca, you know, the big caravans from Cairo, from Jerusalem, from Damascus, Istanbul, they all went, they conglomerated in Ma'an and went to the Hijaz. Then it was the intersection of the Hijaz Railway from Egypt, from Palestine, from Istanbul, from Syria, from Lebanon, from everywhere. Now Ma'an is dead because the caravan stopped going, the train stopped going. People don't travel through there. They either take the Suez Canal or they travel by air. So what we're discussing is, if you're discussing the crisis of Ma'an, you're either discussing why Ma'an is dead, or the internal corruption and efficiency, and should we do this better or should we do that better inside? There is nothing that you can do inside Ma'an to revive it, and there's nothing you can do. Nothing is a bit drastic, but there's little you can do inside Lebanon to revive the economy. If we don't return to being an open society with freedom and with that's the bottom line. On there's a lot you can fix anywhere, you know. There's corruption everywhere, except in Washington D.C. and the Vatican, of course, and there's no. I mean, they should be things should be improved. Governance should be improved anywhere, but governance is not what made the country collapse and what caused the economy to go bankrupt.
So Nadeem, we're probably going to lose a few people when we get to 2:45, but we won't lose everybody. And so if you're open to staying past 2:45, that would be great. I have one question from Haja Diallo. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much for speaking with us. I know we're running out of time, but I did want to hear insight on just talking about international perspective and presence. And maybe if you could speak a little bit on what role the US has played in terms of foreign policy in just bringing the current state of Lebanon and how it might have precipitated it, and what should the Biden administration maybe include in its agenda to just help contribute in meeting the demands of the people.
Okay, that's where you lose half your audience. I mean, of course, the whole region is affected by American policy. We belong to an international order which includes the United States as the main power, the main international power that protects the region. I don't think any of the Gulf states will last 1 minute if American protection is not there. It does not, if there's no American protection. If Iran becomes a nuclear power, the Gulf states will become maybe a bit like what Eastern Europe used to be for the Soviet Union in the post-World War II. You know, if there is a Prague Spring, it will be crushed, and so American policy is crucial to the region, and I'm not sure which is better, the Iraq invasion or the Iraq withdrawal, or the Iran deal or no Iran deal, or the maximum pressure on that. But American policy is definitely a factor. What I can tell you is that President Obama's policy was a complete disaster to the region, mainly because of Syria. I mean, in order to prevent another Iraq from happening in Syria, we created a far greater catastrophe in Syria than anything that happened in Iraq before. I mean, it needs another talk to do this, and I'll never be invited again. But
are you kidding? Anytime. I'm ready to sign you up for your next talk.
No. What I mean is that I don't think this is a subject you can discuss rationally in the United States of America now. But without being thrown labels at it's. I think the Syria, the way Syria was, the way Bashar al-Assad was allowed, and I underline allowed, to destroy Syria is a huge crime, which the whole world has suffered from. I mean, it's suffered. Europe has suffered from the. I mean, the crisis in Europe is linked to the amount of refugees coming from Syria as well. So that's my answer. I mean, in the region, we were really disheartened by the fact that American liberals support the worst type of regimes, and Americans illiberals fight them. There has to be some consistency in American policy. Otherwise, if America is on the decline, people who are part of that system are going to suffer. If what we're seeing is the implosion of the American system in the world, then it will have consequences.
So Nadeem, I have 3 questioners on my list, and let's say we've got about 10 minutes. So let me.
Okay. So I'll be very quick.
So the first person I have is Harrison Mann.
Hi, thank you, Professor Shehadi. You know, on the subject of consistency in American policy, which I think will leave us all disappointed, our policy towards Lebanon internally, I think, has been pretty consistent, and at least in recent years, U.S. strategy has been focused on supporting the Lebanese armed forces almost exclusively. That's most of the aid we give to Lebanon, and it's the main entity that we engage with.
Yeah.
And I want your thoughts on, I guess, the realisticness or the wisdom of the strategy that the Lebanese armed forces could really balance against Hezbollah. And then also you mentioned that the one time where the Lebanese state was capable of providing its own security was when it was a dictatorship. So I also wonder if there are risks to building up the Lebanese military as the strongest institution in the country.
Yes. Okay. Now, if you fight Hezbollah, if Israel attacks Hezbollah tomorrow, Hezbollah will become stronger, because you're reinforcing Hezbollah's narrative that it is there because of an Israeli threat. If the Lebanese army attacks Hezbollah tomorrow, Hezbollah will become stronger because it will say that the Lebanese state is fighting the Shia and we are protecting the Shia. If there is a civil war tomorrow to fight Hezbollah, then the Hezbollah will be stronger because it will mobilize the sectarian. Again, there will be sectarian mobilization, which would strengthen Hezbollah, which will provide them with the arms and all that. I think what's wrong with American policy is that it doesn't see the big picture. You cannot fight ISIS in Syria forgetting that it is in Syria and that there is the destruction of Aleppo happening next door, which you have given a green light to. I mean, when the United States decided to focus on ISIS, you know, and I use the word focus because that's what the military used to do. We are focused on ISIS. John Kerry made a statement saying that, you know, we still believe in a political solution in Syria, and we hope that after the Battle of Aleppo is finished, that the Assad regime will be more amenable to a political solution. This is a green light for the destruction of Aleppo. This is a green light to produce 500,000 more refugees, for killing, you know, thousands of people. And this is saying to the regime, it's okay, you can do it, but please afterward, now we've appeased you by doing that, will you come and talk to us? This is not a policy that looks at, I mean, at Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Lebanon, Palestine, Afghanistan, and even Pakistan and North Africa as one theater of operation. The revolutionary guards see it that way. Iran sees it that way. When Soleimani was assassinated, he was doing a tour of his troops. He was in Lebanon, where he met with Hamas and with Hezbollah. Then he went to Syria. Then he came. For him, there's no border. He plays the chess game, and there is one, you know, there's one objective, which is checkmate, get the United States out of there, and control the region, divide it with Russia or whatever. The United States plays it more like a poker game, where every hand is totally separate. There's no connection between one and the other, and you can pull out at any time and cut your losses. So you know, giving 100 million, a few million to the Lebanese army is not going to solve it when you allow Hezbollah to fight in Syria, and when you refrain from mentioning Iran's role in Syria, with starvation sieges and massacres and all that, because you're afraid to spoil the Iran deal. I mean, you know, don't let me start it.
No, that's an important important provocation. So the next person I have is John Lamb, and then I have Abdul Mughal, and I'm wondering if we should do it this way and ask those two gentlemen each to ask their question, to which you could then respond after they've both asked. Yeah. So can we do that? I hope it will be agreeable to Mr. Lamb and Mr. Mughal. So let's start with John Lamb. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, Nadeem. Let me also, before I ask my question, recommend to the people who are attending today that they get on the listserv of LAU in New York, because you guys put on some terrific programs. I was interested in your saying how finally, after 100 years of Grand Liban, people from Trablus and the Bekaa and Sur and Saida have become okay with the Lebanese state. And one can understand for the Maronites, because, you know, Beirut is a lot nicer playing field than just being confined to the old Mutashar Rafiyeh. The Greek Orthodox, they see what happened to their compatriots in Syria, and that wasn't very pretty. But I'm wondering what you think, was it just the passage of time? Or I know when I lived in Saudi Arabia in the early 80s and met a number of Lebanese Sunnis and Shi'i, I think there in exile, they realized perhaps for the first time just how Lebanese they were and how much they had in common. Or do you think it was also just sort of what's happened culturally in Lebanon? I just recently rewatched that incredibly wonderful film of Jack Jansen, We Loved Each Other So Much, about Fayrouz. And, you know, was it in part just sort of the Fayrouz and the Rahbani brothers, and just that there was something about that was happening in Lebanon during that period that helped to create that sense of Lebanese identity besides just the passage of a century.
Right. You want to do
yeah, that's great question. And let's go to Abdul Mughal. Go ahead, sir.
I can't hear you.
Let me ask him to unmute.
Unmute. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. It's a fascinating talk, and I am illuminate. I found your talk to be very illuminating, but also I'm very confused. It looks like you're very supportive of the existing political order in Lebanon, which has been existing since the mandate. At the same time, you seem to be very pessimistic about the future. My question is, a related question is, about your vision of a solution to the Palestinian-Israeli problem that will ensure a prosperous and peaceful Lebanon. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, two good questions on which to end.
Two good questions. Yes. Okay, so telegraphically, John, tension. Sometimes I feel I'm the only sectarian person in Lebanon, because everybody declares that they are against sectarianism. General Aoun, Nabih Berri, Walid Jumblat, they all declare that they are for a civil state. They want to abolish sectarianism. So they're either lying or I'm the only sectarian in the country. And if you convince me of secularism, then you've solved the problem. I think that relations between groups become more tense or less tense depending on how much threat they are to each other. There's no such thing as permanent sectarianism or permanent tension on sectarian grounds in anywhere, not just in Iraq. There's a very good reason for Sunni-Shia tension. Saddam Hussein in 1991 crushed the uprising and massacred people and massacred the Kurds and gassed them, and so that's what creates tension when you identify a group as being your oppressor, and there's tension. In Lebanon, we've been through the whole round. I mean, in 1982, when you used to meet the Lebanese in Saudi Arabia, it was Christian-Muslim, grosso modo, tension. It doesn't exist anymore. There's no more Christian-Muslim tension in Lebanon. It's been resolved in the Taif agreement, and it was resolved in 2005. And possibly Samir Jaja, the head of the Lebanese forces, would win elections in Akkar if he stood against Hariri. There's no permanent tension, and the system allows for every group to feel that they have some sort of protection in the system, that they cannot be completely taken over or marginalized. So that's the reason why, having tested the ground on every single period, in the end the Lebanese have less tension. There is definitely no sectarian tension amongst the youth in Lebanon. There's not even prejudice among the youth in Lebanon. Abdul, this is the easiest question in the world. And I'll solve it for you. And it's not my solution. I think there was a solution proposed in 2010 by Nabil Shah, which is to forget about Oslo. The Palestine state already exists. It was declared in 1988 by Yasser Arafat. It's been recognized by 139 countries in the world, far more countries than recognized Kosovo when Kosovo was admitted to the UN. So he proposed to just go to the Security Council pass a resolution and admit the state of Palestine to the General Assembly, and you have a two-state solution. You have two states side by side with lots of problems, but there are no two states in the world that have no problems next to each other. The Palestinians and the Israelis will just have far more problems than others. And they have a lot of tools to resolve the problems once the legal status is once you change the game. I think the problem with Oslo is two conditions put by Israel on the negotiations. One of them is that nothing is resolved until everything is resolved, and the second is end of all claims. So everything else, 30 years, in October 2021, at the end of this year, it'll be 30 years since Madrid. 30 years of track 2, track 1, track 3, study groups, UN reports, World Bank reports. You can fill a whole building with proposed solutions on water, on refugees, on everything. But everything is blocked. Everything is in drawers and on shelves because we can't reach final status with end of all claims and everything is resolved and all that. So that's my solution. Just solve it. Just go to the original mandate of the CCP, the commission that was set up in 1948 by Resolution 194, which had a broader mandate, and create the two states and get on with it. That's
well.
It would undermine the axis of resistance. You know, it would undermine the Iranian agenda, the Bashar al-Assad agenda, the Hezbollah agenda, the Houthi agenda, the Hamas agenda. It would undermine all the what I call the bad people.
Well. So Nadeem, as is your want, you leave us wanting more, and at the end of the conversation, you open up several more productive avenues of exploration. And so I hope that we'll have the opportunity to have you back. In the meantime, I just want to thank you and convey the thanks of our audience, many of whom have messaged me about what a great speaker you have been, what a great guest you have been. And so I hope we'll do this again. And I thank the audience for your tremendous questions. And I hope that we'll see you again next week. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And I want to thank Abdul Mughal for saying that he was confused, because if he's confused, it's just a reflection that I'm confused too. No.
Well, it's you know, one would have to be dishonest to say they're not confused by this region. So it's a testament to your intellectual honesty that you also admit to it. All right, everybody. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.